Cheryl, I feel like I haven't seen everybody in so long.
Yes, happy 4th to everybody. Okay,
So,
so
yeah, sorry,
we
go ahead.
get started. A few more people might be coming in. So Wendy, if you could just monitor the room.
Will
So
do.
good morning all, welcome back. I hope you all had a good holiday break. Hi, Mara. And today we're going to have a special guest, Ben Curlin. He's going to be speaking. Ben is the co-founder of a company called Bill Fixers, and that is something we all need to know about. So I appreciate him taking the time to talk to us. But before we do that, we'll do our usual go round, and I'll start. I'm Alex. I work with Wendy and Jyoti, who's also on the call. We work with the QCP's development department. QCP, of course, is the nonprofit that serves people with developmental disabilities in Queens for about 71 years now. So we started this group in March of 2020, Ben, as a sort of a adjunct to what we were doing with our normal development activities. And we hoped that it was going to be an in-person meeting, but then the pandemic started and we just turned it into an online meeting, and we've been going each week ever since. So it's had some legs. So Steve, would you mind starting off? Steve Carp.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Carp, Variable Promotions. We do two things. We are commercial printers, and we supply promotional items. Printing is anything you could think of ink on paper, whether it's business cards and stationery, postcards, invitations, posters, banners, catalogs, sell sheets, annual reports, etc. Promotional products, anything that bears your name for image recognition. Tote bags, umbrellas, t-shirts, pens, etc. We work with many not-for-profits. In my world, good times or bad times, not-for-profits are still printing. Thank you very much.
Lillian Rodriguez, welcome.
Hi, hello everybody. It's my first time here. My name is Lilian Rodriguez. I am an insurance agent for Allstate for about 20 years now. Nancy Vargas was the one who invited me to the group, and I'm grateful for that. And when she told me that you work with the developmental disabled, my son is 22 years old. He is autistic, high-functioning autistic child. So for sure, this caught my attention, and I was eager to join today's meeting. So hopefully I come every time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking the time, Lillian. Norman Wasserman.
Good morning, everybody. Norman Wasserman. I am the owner of the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man, which is us giving you 1 hour to tell the world basically what your business is all about. Our viewership is 5,300. We don't get 5,300 at each meeting. It's more like 2,000 or 3,000. But it's very good, and we're very busy with it. Been doing it for about 4 years. My main business is Friend Entertainment USA, where I produce concerts around the country. I can stream them, but most recently we have just booked 9 live concerts, 3 of which are going to be at Adelphi for various different charities, and we got a whole bunch of shows coming up, and also started booking for next year. So if anybody is interested, please give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Levin.
Good morning, everybody. Neil Levin, Webline Media Group. I don't know if you could tell, but I have a little bit of a cold. I went to a networking meeting last week. Probably kissed too many people. Okay, so I'm suffering. Webline is a 26-year-old media company that designs websites. We've worked on over 1,000 projects in 100+ industries, small companies up to publicly traded, and we offer online marketing services, Google ad campaigns, things like that, in addition to website design.
Thank you. Hope you feel better. Tony Foy.
Good morning. My name is Tony Foy. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator, LaGuardia Performing Arts Center, which is located in LaGuardia Community College. I work with the community, our local community, as well as with the college, which is a community college, which actually, if anyone knows students who are looking for a wonderful place to enroll, that would be one. it is like I think it's like in the top number of community colleges in the country. We as an organization rent a theater. We have 2 theaters that we run, and there we do our own programming, as well as if you have something special that you would like to do, you can let us know. I'll put the information in the chat.
Thank you, Julie. John Rafferty.
Good morning, everyone. John Rafferty from WatchGuard 24/7. I'm the owner of a full-service security guard company. So we provide security guards, concierge, and fire safety directors to residential commercial markets throughout New York and New Jersey.
Thank you very much. And Cheryl Miller.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cheryl Miller with Legal Shield Business Solutions. Legal Shield is a North American company. We're 50 years old now. We work with, well, I work primarily with small businesses, and we provide affordable access to legal services, identity theft, and cyber attack solutions. I enjoy working also with independent insurance agents, financial planners, and helping them provide our cutting edge products to their client base. And I don't think I've been here a couple of weeks, so I'm glad to see everybody again.
Thank you. Ben Horowitz, the other Ben.
Yeah, good morning. Benjamin Horowitz. I'm the CEO of BSB Consultants. We specialize in group health insurance for organizations as small as 2 employees up to a few thousand.
Thank you. Let's see, Mara Ohanian.
Good morning, guys. Feels like a really long time. I hope everybody had a nice Independence Day weekend. Mara Ohanian, Cruise Planners. It's a travel franchise representing American Express Travel, and the new programs, American Express programs, are coming out. I have to finish the training. Anyway, I do all kinds of travel, individual, groups, land, cruises, and my specialty is river cruises. Just keep that in mind. World is opening. We live only once. So lots of things happened over the weekend, which kind of makes you think again. You know, you may be asleep in your bed, God forbid, and all of a sudden half of the building collapses. So just keep that in mind. We live only once.
Thank you. David.
Hi, David Feinberg here in Israel. I grew up in New York and New Jersey. Most of my business contacts are there, and I'm connecting people with unique products and unique services.
Thank you very much, David. Annette Roth.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good to see people. I am from Northwell Health, as you can see, Director of Community Outreach. And what this means is that I set up our physicians and surgeons to deliver free health lectures to all kinds of venues, and it's all free. They're health lectures. So we are in libraries, chambers of commerce, companies, corporations, unions, clubs, associations. So if you're interested in having a lecture, and right now they're virtual for your organization, I will put my information into the chat. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
And Mark Berlin, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, for the invitation. Sorry it's taken me a while. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Mark Berlin, healthcare consultant and patient care advocate for seniors as well as people with disabilities. It's very important to me. I was born and raised with cerebral palsy, and I'm very familiar with United Cerebral Palsy here on Long Island. And it's very important for people with disabilities as well as seniors to get access to the care that they deserve, especially in Long Island as well as the New York City area.
Thanks, Mark. And Chaim.
Good morning. Business and life coach. As we know, we can separate life from business. It's go together. But there is a principle that follow with that. And the question is, if we follow the principle, when we do that, we can predict the result. And that's the way the life built, from principle. That's what I teach. That's what I help people to do.
Thanks very much, Chaim. Okay, so Ben, I'm going to put you in the spotlight. And there we are, you're on the spotlight. So Ben, we really appreciate your taking the time. I know you're a busy man running a company, but just give us a little bit of an introduction, your background, and then the nature of Bill Fixers, and the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Alex. I was delighted to get your email in the first place, and I'm more than happy to give any advice I can. I promise you, I'm less busy than you think I am. So, by way of background, my company is called Bill Fixers. We are based here in Nashville. We've got a team of about 15 people. What we do is negotiate on behalf of consumers and small businesses to save you money on your bills. So we basically come in as mercenaries and get you a better rate on TV, internet, phone service, whatever it is. And then, for businesses, all sorts of things, anything from software contracts to dumpsters, we kind of come in and negotiate on your behalf. So Alex asked me to come in and talk a little bit, and what I figured would be helpful, and anybody can stop me at any time as it is unhelpful, is to kind of give a primer on how you can do this yourself, because the real secret is that what we do isn't some like magic act. You can just negotiate all your own bills. I'm sure a lot of people here already do. And so, I just wanted to kind of give some tips on how people can do that for themselves to save money. So I am happy to
let me
share
share.
my screen.
Okay, yep, let me give you that opportunity. Hold on. Sorry about that.
No.
Let me get you.
Anything to have the camera, off of a giant face of mine, I'm happy.
There you go.
All right, does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Cool. So, basically what I'm going to go over is, how you negotiate bills specifically on behalf of businesses and organizations. Same thing applies for businesses as for nonprofits. And a lot of this is also applicable just for your own personal bills if, you don't manage bills for a business. So this is a really rough baseline, but what we find is that most businesses overpay at least 20% on kind of those recurring fixed costs. So it's really worthwhile. I mean, that adds up very quickly when you're thinking about all those different services that you pay for. And if you were able to put 20% of that spend back into your operating budget, it makes a big difference. The kind of things that I have the most expertise in are things like telecom contracts, software, so Zoom, that kind of thing, waste, which is anything from medical waste to recycling and shredding, and maintenance contracts, which are a big wide world. We do all sorts of stuff that I never thought I would know anything about. We just negotiated the elevator maintenance contracts for a ski lodge in Colorado. It's kind of everything is negotiable when you're dealing with business bills specifically. And so it's really, kind of worth it to take a look at some of those expenses and see if there's a way you can lower them. The general rule I try to give people is it's basically always worth it when you're looking at an expense of yours to see if there's a way to bring it down, because almost always anybody that services B2B has great margins, and so they're always happy to cut a deal to keep you around. For kind of background, the reason most people end up overpaying in the first place is because when you get new service with one of these providers, you basically get it because you need it. So most people don't have the time to shop around and get the exact right rate. It's March 2020 and you need a Zoom subscription because otherwise you have no way to keep your office running. Or you've opened a restaurant and you need a dumpster out back. People just get into these contracts, and then these big corporate suppliers are really, really good at kind of adding little fees and adding price increases. And so maybe you got a good deal in year one, or maybe you knew somebody who set you up with a good deal, and then you've been around for a couple of years now and the price goes up year after year after year. And I think a lot of people find themselves, they just kind of they pay the bill, they think that's what the rate is, and so 5 years down the line you're paying double what you were when you signed up, and that just seems perfectly normal, when in reality you could be paying that intro rate the whole time. It just requires dealing with it, which which is really annoying. And if you're running a business, or you're working in a business or a nonprofit, there's other more important stuff, and there's always an emergency going on, so it kind of gets lost by the wayside. So the thing about bills is that they're all negotiable, and so when you find that those rates have gone up, it's always worth it to kind of set aside some time and negotiate them, get your pricing down. So I kind of generally think about that as a three-step process, and you'll notice that only a third of it is actually negotiating the bill, because most of what you're doing is just spending the time to understand what's going on with your bills and to make sure that you're actually getting a fair deal on them. So I normally start off by doing some research on whatever the service is, then you do the actual negotiation, but then you have to actually keep an eye on how things are going forward. So the research phase is something that a lot of people just don't, it just doesn't come up, because life just comes one day at a time, and so you make changes as they're needed, and people don't normally sit down and reevaluate what they're spending on, whether it's worth it. So kind of the first step there is to actually, sit down, and it seems silly, but sit down with whatever services you're paying for and make sure that what you're paying for is actually the right fit for you. So, I find all the time we negotiate like cell phone contracts for people, and I get organizations all the time who have 10 cell phone lines that don't use any data, they don't have any minutes, and they just belong to somebody in the organization who doesn't work there anymore, and the phone's in a drawer, or they got on some special promotion from the provider that said, oh, we'll give you a free extra line, and that was 5 years ago, and now they're paying for it and they don't have any idea why. So trying to figure out what you actually need, kind of even separate from what you're paying for, and then making sure the two of those align, it makes a huge difference. The other thing is just going through what you're actually paying for and making sure that you understand all of it. So, these random fees get added on, these random services get added on. And if before you start the negotiation, I don't know what this is, I'm not sure that I need this or want this, then you'll be able to get a better sense of, what the areas are that you can make changes to. And you can also find out, basically, how did you get screwed before? Because you can look at your old contract and say, well, they baked in a 10% a year price increase to this contract. That's why the bill's gone way up. And when I renegotiate this, the priority needs to be that I don't want these price increases baked in. And the next part is kind of the classic thing to do, which is, it takes a little bit of time, but go out, get quotes from other providers for the same services, so you have kind of a baseline of what's out there. Almost anything that you're paying for, there's going to be some sort of competition for it. And when you go out and get a quote, they'll give you, a pretty good, pretty competitive, low introductory quote. And then when you are talking to your provider, you have a bargaining chip where you basically are saying, hey, I can get the same thing for half the price at this other vendor, so why should I stick around with you? And a lot of people will do price matching. They'll, it makes a big difference, because you're not just saying, oh, well, why don't you bring my rate down? You're actually, have proof that there's a better rate out there, and then that they should match it. And these last two things are negotiation lingo. But an aspiration point is basically trying to figure out beforehand what your best case scenario is. What the best case realistic scenario is. Obviously, you're not going to pay $0 for the service, but if the negotiation went perfectly your way, what would you like to get? And it's really useful psychologically going into it, because otherwise, if somebody gives you a little crumb, you say, great, well, everything's a little better, so I'll happily take it. Whereas if you've kind of set in your brain, well, I want to pay, 40% less, then when they say, okay, well, we can do a 5% reduction for you, then you think, well, that sucks. I'm trying to get to 40%, and you feel more comfortable psychologically pushing for that. So that's really helpful to kind of know what you're aiming for. And the other one, the best alternative is another negotiation term, but it's basically the aspiration point is, let's say the negotiation goes perfectly, what do you get? And the best alternative is, let's say the negotiation falls apart, you can't get a better deal. What's the best alternative solution to this negotiation? So who's another supplier that can get you this deal? What's a different service package that would also meet your needs? And again, psychologically, it makes a huge difference, because instead of feeling like, well, I got to take whatever deal they'll give me, you know that you have kind of a fallback, that you're going to be comfortable saying, okay, well, cool. You won't meet me in the middle, then, I've already figured out, I've got this other plan that'll work for me. And that kind of gets into a concept I think about a lot when it comes to negotiation stuff, which anybody who's taken, a Psych 101 class, this will be a little repetitive, but our brains are not very, they're not computers, so they're not perfect at analyzing data, and but what they're really good at is taking shortcuts, which works most of the time. But when they take a shortcut, I think that the technical term is like heuristics. When they take a shortcut, they often will misanalyze the data that's in front of them. And it's really important to understand the kind of shortcuts that your brain takes for two reasons. One of which is that the negotiator across the table from you, whether that's an account rep or whoever it is aware of these things. So when you go to, buy a car or whatever, the person that you're dealing with, has been trained in sales tactics. They know the kinds of shortcuts that your brain takes. So it's the reason that prices end in 99 cents is because your brain thinks that's a way bigger deal than if they end in a dollar. So knowing those kind of cognitive biases makes a big difference in making sure that you don't get them used against you. But you can also kind of turn the tables, and if you're aware of them, you can use them to your advantage. So this is a giant chart of every single one of these little effects. But a couple that are useful to keep in mind. Anchoring is the concept that basically when you hear a particular number, you're more inclined to think that any other number is more similar to that. The classic psych experiment for that was, there was a study in the 70s. They did a thing where they made a big Wheel of Fortune wheel, and it was numbered 1 to 100, and they rigged it so it would either land on 10 or 60, and then they would spin it, and then they would ask whoever was in the psych study, what percentage of countries in the world are in Africa? And if you spin it and the rigged wheel lands on 10, then on average, people said that 25% of countries in the world are in Africa. If you spin it and the rigged wheel lands on 60, then on average, people say that 45% of countries in the world are in Africa, which the two are completely unrelated. There's no reason to adjust your answer, but your brain, hears, hey, a bigger number. Well, it's got to be near a bigger number. I'll make a guess. And where that comes in handy in negotiations is the concept that you can basically throw out an anchor to start a negotiation. So if you say, hey, I want to pay $500 a month for this service, then the person that you're negotiating with is now thinking relative to that number. Whereas if they started by saying, hey, I want you to pay $1,000 a month for this service, then you're now thinking relative to that number. So if the final number, if the next number that comes up is $750, then they're now asking you to, to pay this big premium, or they're offering you a great discount. And the way that you think about that makes a huge difference. So if you can kind of control that conversation, then they're kind of the ones on the back foot there. It's the same reason that, like, when you go to a department store to buy a pair of pants, if it's a $60 pair of pants, you think, I don't want to spend $60 on a pair of pants. But if right above it, it says on the tag, this is a $400 pair of fancy designer pants that have been marked down to $60, then all of a sudden it's a great deal, and TJ Maxx is in business. So it makes a big difference. The other two concepts here, one of which is mirroring. That's a classic, like, people trying to get you to like them kind of tactic. If you mimic the body language or words that other people use, our brains talk, oh, that's somebody that's like me. They're trustworthy. I think they're doing a great job. I like them. And you'll notice that all the time. You'll notice, like, salespeople doing that, but you can also, do that to get someone to like you. One of its friend biases is a tactic called labeling, which I tend to like better because mirroring strikes me as like a little shady, but labeling is literally just, you just describe your understanding of how the other person is feeling. So, if somebody tells you something, you literally just repeat it back to them. They say, I think that this price is unrealistic for us to get to. And you say, so what I'm hearing from you is you think that this price is unrealistic for us to get to. And then immediately they'll go, they understand me. They're trying, they're listening to me. I respect that, and maybe I can work with them. Just personally, I think that's really helpful. On top of the fact that it's, like, psychologically helpful, it also ensures that you're on the actual same page as them. And you can make sure that you are actually actively listening and are actually not misunderstanding. So I tend to think that's super useful. The last of these kind of cognitive biases is the concept of loss aversion, which is basically that we attribute much more weight to a loss than a gain. So an example of that is, like, if you went to if your boss called you into their office and they said, I'm giving you a 10% raise, then, you'd be happy and you'd go home and you'd tell your family and things would be good. And if your boss called you into their office and said, I'm cutting your pay by 10%, you'd be furious and you're off, like, looking for a new job, and it's completely unfair. And it's the same total amount of money, but if you're losing it, then it makes a huge difference to you. And if you're gaining it, it's not as big of a deal. I think generally in studies, it's like losses have 2.5 times or something the weight that a gain has, which, again, that's a perfect example of that's not rational. In theory, they should have the exact same weight. So if you can put yourself in a position where you override that bias and you're willing to take a little, you're willing to take the loss, or you're willing to accept the gain and have the other person take the loss, you can control the situation such that you're doing the situation that is rational, but they're doing the thing that feels more valuable. And just kind of having a sense of that, so that you don't get yourself into a situation where you're fighting really, really hard not to lose that 10% when you could be, gaining 20%. So just, and it's worth it to kind of do some research on other biases. I don't want to get into all of them because I'm not a psych professor, and I'm sure the actual literature is more complicated than I'm making it out to be. But I just find it really useful when you're in a negotiation, thinking about the ways in which your brain is betraying you a little bit and how you can turn that on its head. So as to the actual negotiation side of things, which is what I claim I'm here to give advice on, the things that I think are the most helpful, starting off by being friendly and building a relationship with somebody makes a huge difference. I think most people think about relationships in negotiations as, like, adversarial and kind of hard charging, and really good negotiators are people that, like, strike a hard deal. And that's true sometimes, but most of the time, what I find is that the person that you're negotiating with, especially in the kind of work that we do, tends not to be, the owner of Optimum. You're negotiating with, some account rep at Optimum, and they, they don't care all that much about the service and the situation. And so if you can build a relationship with them, you're much more likely to catch flies with honey than vinegar. That halo is another one of those cognitive biases. It's the same reason that if you like somebody for one reason, you'll like them in other ways. So people, like, if you see an attractive person, people are more likely to rate them as intelligent, which is stupid, but that's just what people do, because they think, oh, they're good in this one way, so they must be good in other ways. And so if somebody thinks, oh, well, this is somebody who's really friendly and asking me about my kids, they're also going to think, and so they're probably, doing a fair bargain on this negotiation, and so I should strike them a deal. And that can be really helpful. The next thing, just silence. The beauty and power of silence in a negotiation is super underrated. People are very, very uncomfortable with silence and will always try to fill it. So if somebody makes you an offer, your natural inclination is kind of immediately to respond. And generally, since we want to be likable and we want to be easygoing, if somebody makes you an offer, your natural inclination is to say, oh, yeah, of course, that sounds great. No problem. Thank you for compromising. And what you'll find is if you just wait, then people start negotiating against themselves. So, they'll say, okay, well, I can do a 10% discount. And then they get really uncomfortable and they say, well, I can do it. I can do a 20% discount. How's that? Okay, 25, that's the best I can do. And what happens there is you don't have to spend any of your leverage, your negotiation capital in that situation, because they're negotiating against themselves. And we all do that to ourselves instinctually as we negotiate against ourselves, because you don't want to be in an uncomfortable situation where it's quiet. And if you can take a deep breath and wait out that uncomfortableness, then they'll start backtracking immediately and get you what you're looking for. This next thing is honestly comes up more than almost anything else. Finding win-wins in negotiations, that's like a classic piece of negotiation advice. But the basic premise of expanding the pie is that most people, when you're thinking about a negotiation, you think, have got this, pumpkin pie, and we can split it two ways. So it's either 50-50 or it's 60-40, and my loss is your gain, my gain is your loss. There's the best thing that we can do here is I can try to get a little bit more of the pie. And the concept of expanding the pie is, if you look in the fridge and there's a blueberry pie in there, and it turns out you prefer blueberry pie to pumpkin pie. The person sitting across the table from you prefers pumpkin pie to blueberry pie. And so you both get a full 100% of a pie that you prefer, and everybody walks away happy. And obviously that's super oversimplified, but it really is the case in most negotiations for bills and services, that there are things other than just money. So we tend to think of negotiations as like a zero-sum game of, how low can we get the price? But you have a lot to bargain with that's not necessarily just what you're paying. So if you have multiple locations, then it might be that that's really important to the person you're dealing with, that they're really trying to, to sign a new location, and they don't really care what you're paying for, because their metrics are based on how many, new locations they can bring in. Or they might be having a really serious cash flow issue, and if you can pay up front for the year in advance because you have some extra cash, then they'll take a lot less total money, and you can you can get a better deal on your side and they still get a better deal on their side. Or it might be that their priority is to get you into a long-term deal and you're fine with that. Like, you want to be with this supplier, you're going to be with them for 5 years. And so you can agree to a 5-year contract at a much lower rate, because to them, the certainty of you sticking around for 5 years is more important than the specific rate. Those are some kind of like basic examples that we deal with all the time, but trying to think about it from their position. What are their priorities, and what is there to bargain with? It's not just the price one way or the other makes a huge difference. And you can generally walk away from a negotiation with having given away stuff that you don't care about, that you're happy to give away, and gotten the stuff that does matter to you. And then the last of these is basically just getting yourself comfortable psychologically with saying no. Very similar to that silence aspect, very similar to the best alternative concept. People want to be agreeable. You don't want to cause trouble, and so most people's inclination is to just, if somebody's making you an offer, you accept it and it's all good. And if you can figure out how to feel comfortable turning down somebody's first offer, almost all account reps or salespeople or whoever you're dealing with have a domino of options they can give you. So when you turn down that first offer, they've got a secondary offer that's better, and then they've got a tertiary offer that's even better than that. And they're really hoping that you say yes to that first offer, and then they don't have to give up everything. But if you can practice getting comfortable asserting yourself and saying, no, that doesn't actually work for me, then they will almost always come back with something better. And people get nervous generally when I talk about this, because they worry that you're trading, you're risking losing the service or whatever it is, because it's a scary concept to say no, that that deal doesn't work for me. But the reality of the situation is it's almost anybody who's tried to like cancel an ongoing contract, it's almost impossible to do it. It'll take months. You're going to jump through a million hoops. So just by during the term of a negotiation saying no, there's no real risk involved. The worst case scenario is, they call you back the next day and say, there's nothing I can do. Have you changed your mind? That said, it does really behoove you to feel comfortable, both potentially escalating it. So the classic, like, I want to speak to your manager, really does work. Unfortunate though it may be, since a manager oversees 10 people, then this situation now represents a tenth as much significance as it did to the person you were just dealing with. So and then if you escalate it another level above that, now it represents 1% as much significance. So now the person you're dealing with, the actual money is basically completely insignificant, but what they want to do is just get it off their plate. So if you can't get what you want, if you can move it up that ladder, you'll eventually run into somebody who, just wants the situation resolved. They don't really care what the actual terms are. But ultimately that doesn't always work. And the reason that you have that kind of best alternative is so that you can feel comfortable walking away from the table and saying, this is not going to work for me, and I'm good to go. And the person who feels the most comfortable doing that is generally the person who will, win the negotiation. My brother, who I started the business with, he has always said that like the hardest possible person to negotiate with is like the teen at their summer job behind a counter, because they do not care at all about what the outcome of your situation is. They don't mind if they get fired. They don't mind if you're not a customer anymore. It's not a big deal to them. And to them, they are completely comfortable just walking away from the situation. And so it's really hard to get a deal with somebody like that. But for somebody who you're a big client and your contract matters to them, then they're going to be willing to, you know, cave and give you a big discount or give you the extra services that you need, because it reflects poorly on them and they lose the commission if you walk away. So, you know, you have more leverage than you think you do if you're comfortable being the one who has an alternative and has a way out. And then the last step of that is after the negotiation, making sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's. So the contracts are generally structured in very fine print kind of ways. There are a million little details that you can get screwed on. You know, anybody who's ever dealt with like the waste management contract, they are, you know, they've got 12 different services and fees. They've got price increases built in. They've got, we can just increase the price at any time if we feel like it's built in. You know, it's the same way with almost all contracts with major corporations. And so making sure that you actually understand exactly what you're agreeing to, so that you don't, you know, get a top line number that sounds great, and then when the actual bill comes, you're still way overpaying. Makes a big difference. And then even if that looks good, just trying to keep a regular eye on it. People who own businesses, you know, I'm guilty of this myself. You're really busy, you got other stuff going on, you just kind of pay the bills as they come in, and you don't notice as things get added on or there are billing errors. You know, we generally, what we negotiate is people who are mid-contract term or just getting them a better deal. But we also help people who, you know, there's been a billing error and we're fixing it. And it happens all the time where you get somebody who's just, you know, been charged $10,000 for services they don't actually have and they never needed, but it's been on the bill for, you know, the last year, and they had no idea because they just didn't look that closely at it, or they didn't know what it meant, because it's, you know, you get line items all the time that are just like a series of letters and who knows what that is. So trying to keep a close eye on it makes a big difference. And then just setting aside time to do that renegotiation. So what we do, and I certainly recommend this to other people, is we'll track any expiration dates, any price increases, and we know to renegotiate whenever that stuff comes up. So if you sign a new 2-year contract, you know, making sure to put in your calendar, hey, here's when this expires, here's when I need to know I'm on top of it, so that it doesn't just roll up to some new rate and continue month to month. You know, I know some business owners who, what they do is they just set aside one day a year and they use it to call every one of their vendors and get, you know, and make sure that they're at the best possible rate. And that, you know, that makes a big difference. Because the reality is you got other stuff going on. You're trying to grow the business. You're trying to help the people in the organization, and bills are boring and miserable to deal with, and it sucks. And so people will, it just gets shuffled to the bottom of the pile unless you kind of block off time to deal with it. And that's how people end up way overpaying. So, you know, blocking off that time proactively when you've just saved yourself a bunch of money and realize that the benefit of it means that a year from now, you know, you don't have to reconvince yourself because you've already figured it out. So as kind of just a piece of context, this is a random business that we worked with that, you know, I think they're in New York, which is why I looked them up. It's a health and wellness business. They had like 7 locations, and they were paying, you know, between $400 and $500 a month for AT&T service at those locations. And, you know, they felt like they were getting a perfectly good deal, but they just wanted to check it out. And we got in touch with AT&T and did a lot of back and forth with them. And at the end of it, they were paying, you know, $150 a month for each of the locations. So even when you think you're getting a square deal from one of these companies, often it is the case that, that there's this huge opportunity to lower the prices there. And for them, they had an extra 50 grand then in their operating budget that goes a long way. I mean, that can be a new hire, that can be a new marketing initiative, whatever it is. It can make a big difference, and that's with one supplier. So the actual potential advantages, I think, tend to be really worthwhile. So that's kind of the background, the context there. From just a background on us, if this is something you don't want to do, this is what we do all day, every day. So as I say, the real secret isn't that we're super good at negotiations. It's really more that it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to negotiate your bills, and not everybody has that. Not everybody has that free time because you've got a lot going on. So if there's anything I can do to help, I'm more than happy to. I'll throw my email in the chat here, and anybody's more than welcome to reach out to me. And A, I'm happy for us to negotiate your bills, but B, I'm happy to just kind of give advice on your situation. So that's as much of a presentation as I've got, but I'm happy to answer any questions or do anything I can to be helpful.
Ben, that was wonderful. It was like a graduate course in negotiation. Thank you very much. Any questions for anybody, from anybody?
I would just like to throw out there that for the first time in my life, I walked out of a car dealership this weekend without buying a car. So I'm
That's
very
huge.
proud of that.
You should be very proud of that.
I am. Well, thankfully it wasn't like hard sales, but there are other things that I've been negotiating lately, and it's really helpful. I understand psychology, and pie is my favorite, so I'm happy about the pies too. But no, it's really great information. Thank you, Ben. What in terms of your business? So most of what you and your brother do, I assume, is more on the business side of things, correct?
Yeah. So these days, thankfully, I don't have to do nearly as much actual negotiation myself. I'll tell you, it is not my personal favorite thing to do. It's just something I realize a lot of people needed. But yeah, we work with both consumers and small businesses, and most of my work these days is working with partners to provide bill negotiation as a service or a benefit to their members or users or whatever it is, whether those are businesses or consumers.
Ben, I wanted to ask you a question. A lot of the, all the advice that you gave was meant for the consumer or the business that is trying to negotiate its bills or its contracts. But what if you turn that around? So that, what kind of advice could you offer to the business owners here who have to deal with those same consumers or businesses that want to deal with them? I think a lot of the things that you suggested would apply to the business owner as well. Wait out people, think of the best alternative to a negotiated solution, etc. But can you expand on that just briefly?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I'm used to thinking about it from the client side, but it's absolutely the case that from the business side, the kind of psychology that applies is exactly the same. The tactics that are in place are exactly the same. And the value of kind of doing that prep work beforehand, even though it's a little different, is really similar. So it's not going to be as applicable to go out and get a quote from a different supplier, but it is really useful to sit down before you've got a contract negotiation with a client or a sales meeting with a new client and figure out what your priorities are there, so that from a pie perspective, you can make a deal that works really well for both of you, so that you're, if they're coming to you saying, hey, I want this specific service and I want it for this price, you might be able to realize that, actually, you want them to be, what's more valuable to you is that they give you a testimonial, because you really need a client testimonial, and you need somebody to, film a little video saying, hey, my service is great. And to them, that costs 5 minutes of their time, and they're happy to do it, and they don't care. And so you can be willing to trade what to them is a big deal, this price change, for what to you is a big deal, this testimonial, and trying to kind of figure out what are your priorities, what are the things that actually matter here before you go into that negotiation is exactly the same from both sides. And I think it makes a huge difference.
Does anybody have questions? I'm happy to let the meeting extend if Ben wants to. One of the questions that I had was, what if you run into a situation where and this I think is most applicable in a field like cable providers, where there really aren't a lot of alternatives. If you're not happy with your Comcast cable bill, what are you going to do? And it's a tough one. If there really aren't a lot of suppliers for the service which you'd like to have.
Yeah, and I will say the heart of our business, where we started, was negotiating cable bills, negotiating Comcast, and in a lot of markets they're a monopoly or they're in a duopoly, but there's always you always have the option to just kind of walk away, and there's always kind of alternative options. These days you can get internet, you can get 5G internet with unlimited data from T-Mobile, and and say, okay, well, I'm just going to go and get cell data and use that for my internet. We have a guy on the team who his famous line like 5 years ago was he was talking to a rep about somebody's internet bill, and the rep said, well, what are you going to do? You can't not have internet. And what he said was, well, I guess it's back to books. And just, even when there's not a good alternative, there's always they don't know your situation, they don't know your life, and so the option that you can just not have it is equally as powerful or equally as scary to them as that you could go with a competitor.
Mm-hmm. Questions, comments? Okay.
Ben, can you put your info in the chat?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that was Cheryl. Okay.
Great presentation, Ben. I have a question for you. From your experience, which companies are the worst offenders? I mean, ones that are overcharging the consumers, like cable companies or phone or whatever, phone providers.
I will certainly say in New York, Optimum is crazy. They, everybody wants me to say Comcast always, and Comcast is really miserable to deal with. But Optimum really kind of takes the cake for consumers. Their pricing is just so weird that they'll say, hey, here's your package, and then here's the pieces of the package, and each piece has a different fee, and each fee has a different discount, and then you've got your overall discounts, and then you get, and they structure it in a way that no normal human being could possibly understand or deal with. And so we, with Optimum specifically, we always find people who, are getting super ripped off, not even necessarily because there isn't decent pricing available, but just because they've been wrapped into this weird world of just super confusing billing that it's hard to know if you're getting a fair deal or not.
It's actually hard in some cases to reach someone to talk to with a company that's deliberate. That's not just to make things more automated. That's to keep you away, presumably.
Yeah, no, exactly. If you can't cancel, then you won't cancel.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of structured like that, where the incentives are make it as hard as possible to cancel, make it as hard as possible to get a discount, make it really easy to add on new services.
and to sign up. And so, you know, it's a turnstile and it goes one way, and then you're trapped in there.
Your wait time when you want to speak to a salesperson to add new services, usually about 30 seconds. Your wait time when you want to speak to someone about a problem is usually 2 hours. You know,
Yeah,
so that's not an accident either. You know.
That's why you choose an option that they're interested in, and then you ask your question.
Right.
An old trick. So maybe I shouldn't be complaining about Spectrum that much, huh? I mean, they're not much better, but I got used to calling them once in a while and barking at them, and then they will kind of throw a bone, like $10 discount.
Yeah, no, and Spectrum, I remember like 5 years ago, Spectrum tried to change their model, and they said, well, you know, we're not going to give any discounts anymore. We're just going to have a flat fee, and that's going to be our pricing. And everybody hated it. They had to revert it immediately because, kind of for the exact concept of that, like that anchoring. If you're getting a deal where it's a really expensive service and then you get a discount on it, everybody thinks, oh, that's a really fair deal. Whereas if they just charge that rate, everybody hates it. So it was kind of a beautiful experiment on their part, and it did not work at all, and they had to work the same way that everybody works because our brains are a little broken.
Thank you.
Ben, thank you again very, very much. It's very helpful. And
yeah, no, thanks so much for having me.
More like a psychology class.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So applicable. If you could forward that presentation to me, if you don't mind, I'd like to share it with the group. I would appreciate that. And make sure just put your contact information in the chat window, and then we'll make that available to everybody else. So
awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. Hey, everybody, make sure you sign up for the 21st of July so we can see everybody in person.
Thank you. We'll see you all next week. Thank you, Ben.
Great job.
Thank you. Very nice.
I'll wait until you put the contact information in so I don't lose it.
Bye, everybody.
I'll send you an email.
Okay. Thanks very much, folks.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.